candidates, with candidates for municipal judge, and of course the mayor's race, as well as the bond for the fire department and police equipment. And our guests tonight are from the ward on the north side, and we have the challenger, Jamie Carpenter, and Linda Tracy, the incumbent. And Jamie Carpenter has a family. She works with Access Construction, which is her own business, building, revamping houses and walkways, so as I understand it, so that handicapped accessibility is what it is. And Linda Tracy has been before she went into city government, and still you work in issues, you can tell me, bicycling
and walking.
Bicycling and walking, and that, and
an overlap, really, because we also deal with accessibility issues with the Americans with Disabilities Act, and how our sidewalk system is built, and curb ramps, and how sidewalks, when they cross over driveways, have to go up and over so that we don't get a cross slope. And those kinds of things. So there is an interesting tie here. Okay.
Jamie, first question to you. If you're elected to city council, what would be your priority? What's most stands out in your head and your heart as to what you want to be working on and focusing on?
I think I'd really like to concentrate on bringing some balance to the city council as we now see it, and bringing some, I really, especially in light of the new PAC stuff going on, like to see some cooperation and people getting along for the best of the city. And so that would probably be my first priority, is to kind of get things back to a neutral ground and work together for the city.
Mm-hmm. And Linda, you've been on council how long now?
It will be 4 years in January.
Right,
this is my first term.
Right, and you were elected to office.
Yes, I was. Mm-hmm.
And things are moving along. What would be your first priority in a second term?
My first priority, and really some of the reasons that I'm interested in running again, are some of the same things that prompted me to run 4 years ago. And that is how our community grows and planning for that growth. We're right on the cusp of being able to adopt a a comprehensive plan that is now before the planning board in a public hearing phase. We are just now, as a growth management task force in a city council, looking at the specifics of the subdivision regulations, and then we'll tackle the zoning, which really will be quite the challenge. But those two regulations and the plan form the basis of the 10 growth management tools that we've been working on for the last couple of years. First, identifying what the issues were, identifying what kinds of things we could do as a community to manage our growth, not stop our growth, not control our growth, but plan it, shape it, be able to encourage it in places where we wanted growth, and be able to discourage it in places where we wanted to maintain agricultural land, maintain rural lands where we have sensitive riparian lands, and that kind of thing. So we're right on the edge of being able to really make some big differences here, and I'd like to be returned to work on those.
Okay. Now, each of you has been recommended or endorsed, in your case, the new party has recommended your re-election, and Jamie, in your case, the Citizens for Common Sense Government has recommended or endorsed you. And I'd like to ask you, as I've asked everyone who has received their endorsement, what's your understanding of what they're looking for the city, and how does that match up with what you want for the city?
I think that balance is the key. I think that nobody's trying to keep anybody out of the city council. I don't believe that's the intention of the new party either. I think we just need to see a little bit more balance. Right now we're off balance. We're going a little bit too far left. And I think that that's the opinion of the Citizens for Common Sense, and that's why they asked me to come along. I'm certainly not far right by any means, but I definitely want to state that that's probably the main reason that they're endorsing me.
I guess I've been trying to get at it, not that you're responsible for but I've been trying to get a grip over the past few weeks on what specifically it is that they're most concerned about.
Okay. I think that the biggest concern is the business community is not feeling that it's being represented. In fact, the business community is feeling that it's being obstructed, and roadblocks are being thrown in the way. And because I've had so many business people throw money at me, I think that it's very widely held opinion, and not just business people, but many citizens right here in Missoula. So I think that that's a key issue.
A response there, or what's your status with the new party, and do you have any additional comment on Citizens for Common Sense?
I have been supported by the new party. I have been supported by another of the political parties, but as you know, this is a nonpartisan election, and we as candidates are not allowed to use the name of a political party in our candidacy. So I often get questioned by people when I'm talking to them on their doorsteps, and they say, well, are you a or And I have to tell them that I'm running a nonpartisan campaign, and it's a real challenge because a lot of people are used to being able to make decisions on the basis of the two major political parties we have in this country. I've also been endorsed by the Trades and Labor Council, and so I think the challenge here is really asking ourselves who is going to be making the decisions for Missoula. We know that the Citizens for Common Sense government have gotten a large proportion of their money. I understand 78% of the reported donations have come from outside of the Missoula city limits. 54% of that money has come from outside of western Montana, principally Billings, $5,000, and
I think that was Helena.
Something else. And I believe that in the campaign finance report, it was actually a Billings address that was provided. So if that was an error, perhaps that needs to be corrected. And then someone else in Spokane.
Okay, but could you comment on what Jamie had to say about, though, that business feels obstructed or blocked, or that they have whatever?
And can you add to that what that does to the people who would like to have jobs here, good-paying jobs?
Well, I think what's important here is, rather than talking in general terms, to talk in very specific terms. And I've heard that Jamie in the past has talked about a certain individual who has moved part of his operation to, I believe, Salt Lake City. And yet I understand the other side of that was that he was quite frustrated by not being able to expand his business at its current location. Unfortunately, his current location is in the floodplain, and federal floodplain regulations aren't going to permit him to be able to do that kind of expansion on floodplain land. And so obviously that will be a hindrance to business, but it's for basic public health and safety reasons, not only for the people of Missoula, but people who live downstream, live and work downstream of our river.
Let's go to just briefly touch on, if we can, Eagle Hardware. Yeah, and correct me if I have any of my figures wrong. It's my understanding that the main building that they want would be 200,000 square feet. Is that
204,000
204,000 square feet. And some of the criticism that's been directed at City Council is that that you're over-scrutinizing this, that you're putting too many restrictions, that you're bollocksing up the county's deal, and things like that. What's your take on Eagle Hardware? With a store of that size, should or should there not be some meticulous examination by City Council of such a project?
I believe meticulous is not the word I would use. I think we need to take a look at it, and we need to decide if overall it's going to be best for Missoula. And if it is, then we need to work with the developer of the business to bring that to Missoula in a way that's going to benefit the people who work here, as well as the 300,000 people who can come here and spend their money here and give jobs to other people in other parts of the city.
One of the things that the Eagle Hardware appeared once again, apparently, in some of the television broadcasting, or television advertising that Citizens for Common Sense government had, paid to have aired on local commercial television. And in today's paper that they had pulled those ads because of the mayors pointing out that many of the facts in that advertising were inaccurate, and they did pull it. I was quite surprised at that, but do you have a comment on that?
You know, I've only seen one on TV. I simply don't have time to watch TV. But and I've seen two in the newspaper, and as far as the facts and figures, I am not sure. All I know is that the person who wanted to bring this business to the city threw up his hands and said, I cannot deal with this place for whatever reason. And as far as the facts and figures, I think that it had to do with the fact that some of the figures were tied to the whole project of the Eagle Hardware as well as the other retail stores that wanted to come in. So I think that's where the figures came in.
But they did decide to pull their ads in light of...
I read that in the paper
Yeah.
today. I don't, that's as much as I know, probably as much as you do.
Right. And stone container. It's outside the city limits, but it's our major and industrial polluter in the region. Do you think that city, now I understand the Missoula City County Health Department does a lot of work on that issue. It's also my understanding they don't have any enforcement authority. I can be corrected on that. But my question is this, in light of their status as an industrial polluter of quite some magnitude, both air and water, should the City Council have any higher profile, whether as a bully pulpit, in seeing that they bring that level of pollution down?
Well, I think that we have in the past we've passed resolutions and sent letters on issues that affect our region. And certainly the situation here in Missoula is that we are very much a regional center. We're a regional shopping center, a regional medical center, and certainly what happens in our airshed and into our aquifer affects all of us who live within the airshed. I did want to get back to the Eagle Hardware question, though. We didn't have a chance to discuss that. I think that one of the challenges here is that a lot of people don't realize that this is the largest Eagle Hardware store that Eagle Hardware has ever built. And this is what they were proposing to do. And as you said, it was 204,000 square feet for that building alone. And in addition to that, they wanted to build yet another extra 100,000 square feet, or nearly 100,000 square feet, of additional retail and restaurant space. And that, again, was new to their formula. They've built many, many stores all throughout the Northwest. So this was the largest type of project that our staff had dealt with, that their consultant had dealt with, and that they themselves had dealt with. And so obviously there was a lot for us as a city council to be trying to take in. So we're looking at a situation that the real question on the table, there were two questions. Should this industrial land, this former industrial land, be rezoned to become a shopping center? Now, a lot of people think, well, gee, it's really way out there by the railroad tracks, by Reserve Street. But when you really take a look at it, and you get in your car and you look at your odometer and you drive off in different directions, within 2 miles you are at least 200 houses, or I'm sorry, 900 houses. Within 1 mile you are at 100 apartments just up Grant Creek Road. So that area is going to be changing over time. There are a lot of housing units very close by that could benefit from this shopping center opportunity in a not very far away kind of situation. But the challenge here is that located on Stockyard Road, where there currently is the Jiffy Lube, if anyone's been out there, you know it's very difficult to make a left-hand turn from Jiffy Lube to go back down south on Reserve Street. And that was one of the biggest challenges here with this project, and that led to two conditions that I think are really important for people to understand. One is that because that overpass comes down off the railroad tracks right there and really just begins to flatten out at Stockyard Road, that site would not be good for a traffic light. But a traffic light was proposed to be built 1 block up at Howard Razor Drive, not to be confused with Razor Drive like I did it initially. So the idea would be that here would be the traffic light up here a block, but 40% of the 12,000 cars that are going to be coming and going to this shopping center, including Eagle Hardware, are going to need to turn left to go down South Reserve Street. So there needed to be some way to get them from the shopping center up to the light. So one of the conditions said, well, there are possibilities here. You can improve Old Grant Creek Road to make that up to an urban level of road so it can carry that level of traffic and get people up to Howard Razor Drive to make the left turn. Or you can negotiate, if you're able to, with the neighborhood or the neighboring landowners across the street to put in another street that would more directly take people from the entrance and exit of the Eagle Hardware shopping center and store up to Howard Razor Drive to be able to make that left-hand turn. The second challenge, though...
What's your time now here, please?
Okay. The second challenge here was the issue of whether or not the store could open before North Reserve Street is completed. And as many people know, we're about to undertake, or the state's about to undertake, a massive project up there to expand that roadway to 5 lanes. And with construction, you're never quite sure how long it's going to take. There were people on the City Council committee that was dealing with this issue. A majority of people felt that that store should not be allowed to open prior to that road being completed. I didn't feel that that was a good idea, so I did not vote for that motion. Instead, I proposed an alternate motion for when the whole thing comes up on the floor of the City Council. The City Council has not voted yet because the developer asked to hold off until the end of February. We have a public hearing scheduled for the end of January. My alternative motion said that if they opened before this construction was complete, then what they would have to do is first create a traffic mitigation plan that would be submitted to the state and to the city for their approval. And if their approval was forthcoming, then that store could open. But in no circumstances would they have their grand opening until that street was completed.
And over to you, Jamie. Do you have any additional comments on Eagle, or?
I think we should move on and just let the people decide on that one.
And, is there something on your mind that you'd like to jump in without my...
No, I'd like to hear what you have to say,
Okay.
what kind of questions you have, and
All right.
stick to the issues.
Okay. What does it's been floated on City Council? I think Craig Sweet's name been associated with it. A living wage. It tied into that, for example, if a company came in and was going to get a tax break from the city or get some assistance, along those lines, that that the city should be in a position to be able to bargain or say, all right, if you're going to get this break, then this is what the cost of living is, and I'm paraphrasing.
Right.
Does that make any sense to you, or what's your take on
I think
a
that
living wage?
If and when we do offer tax incentives to businesses, we should let those tax incentives be passed on to the taxpayers, especially the ones who are being employed by that company. So, but I do think it should be a proportional incentive, so that it's not when you get down to do the actual math, it's not an overburden for the business to make it almost impossible for him to do business here. So I think it's a very good concept, but I think it needs to be looked into a little bit deeper, a little bit of math done on it. And as far as a living wage on a whole basis, I think that would just cause a huge economic shift. And I think a lot of people were misunderstanding that in the beginning, and that's where there was a lot of opposition to that, which I don't think is really necessary, because the proposal on the table is valid, I believe.
One of the candidates I interviewed earlier was talking about something that I had not heard of before, and that was, and I toss this one out because you live on the north side, right, where there are a lot of rentals. It was Luann Crowley that brought it up. And she said that she noticed in her ward that more and more of the single-family homes, which had been owner-occupied, were now rentals. And so, in effect, they were, landlord-renter situation.
Right.
Some landlords being far away, not here, but far away. Either way. And she was talking about that this is something that she might like to introduce. I mean, she was just, floating it out.
Right.
But that there needed to be greater accountability on the part of landlords to make certain that, that the house was kept up. Whether aesthetically, the yard, the paint, the insulation, whatever. I mean, I'm using my words now, but it was I thought it was an interesting thing for discussion. And the north side has a lot of rentals, and I don't know, do you have a take on that?
I think that it is probably important that we do have a certain amount of standards for rentals, for habitability. I always have trouble with that word. And when I say that word, I'm talking running water, heat. I think it should be well insulated. I mean, it's only fair because they're going to have to pay the heat bill. Those kind of things. And for folks who absolutely refuse to make those kind of adjustments to people who live in their renters, I think that there should be some incentives for them to bring their places up to par. But as far as paint and some of those other issues that you talked about, I'm not so sure we should regulate. I think there's way too much regulation going on in Missoula right now. So I think we should be a little bit careful.
Could you give us a couple of examples of what you see as over-regulation?
Well, let's see. What comes to mind is what's happening to a lot of the businesses right now. And I think that what also comes to mind is I don't want to say, it makes me fearful that the current trend right now in the City Council is to control everything and have their fingers in every little thing. And even when the people we pay our tax dollars to put together a recommendation, and even when the people come to the City Council and say, this is what we want, it's overlooked because the current City Council seems to know what's best for us lowly little people.
I think it would be helpful, though, if we could talk about specific cases, because then people would know exactly what you're talking about, and I might be able to provide some additional information that could help us all better understand the situation. Can you give us some specifics of some of the kinds of things you've been talking about?
The Eagle Hardware is a good one, and also, that's another thing that, as far as the ads being pulled from the Common Sense, I read and I also heard an ad on the radio about Mansion Heights, and if the new party wants them to be honest, if that's what they're calling them is dishonest, which I don't think it's dishonest, but I think if they want them to be honest, then they better watch it because they're going to get what they ask for. And what the city taxpayers have to do now is pay $600,000 in 4 years if they want that open space. That was given to them in the Plan B. That was rejected by the City Council because of regulations and whatever you want to call it. So now the city taxpayers have a choice to pay for $600,000 for open space or let this man, get what his land is worth and build houses there.
Well, that's not exactly what the situation was. The original plan was 160 houses spread over the whole hillside. It was approved in 1983, and it was extended in 1993 to the year of 2000 or 2004. I'm not remembering the specific details. But the challenge here, when the developer brought forth his proposal, was 151 houses, more clustered than the original 160 had been, but still not, we felt it was too much density that high up on the hill, that far away from services, and we were quite concerned about air quality. The amount of land that was left over that was to have been put into some sort of common area does not equal the same amount of land that we're talking about here.
But now we have to pay for it.
And what we're looking at here is in our open space plan that was adopted unanimously by the city and the county, Mount Dean Stone Mountain is one of our cornerstones. So we've always known that that's an area that we're looking for, and we're looking at many different opportunities throughout the community on those cornerstone properties, not only for purchase but also for conservation easements. And we've had many fine examples in the last 2 years of landowners who have put their properties under conservation easements to protect them from Missoula's
I think that's a good way to do it, the conservation easements. But now, like I said, now we have to pay for it, and it would have been given to us. And that's not that much of a difference, that what we have now and what we could have had based on principle. I mean, we have quite a few houses up there, and in 4 years, if we don't purchase that land, then there's going to be houses all the way up to the top, and he has every right to build them.
I wanted to give you an opportunity because there was a letter in the Missoulian today also that was critical of you and that's why I wanted to give you the opportunity to respond to that,
I
because otherwise
appreciate
you wouldn't.
Yes, I would.
No, I mean, it was.
Yes.
But I wanted you to have the opportunity because I don't know who the letter writer was, but.
Well, I do. I know, and if anybody read it, and anybody who knows me and anybody who heard me ask that exact same question throughout the entire ward knows that that is absolutely ridiculous. I'm not allowed to say the L word. But I'll come right out right now and tell you that my very own brother, who I love very, very much, is a homosexual. And I am one of the least prejudiced people in the whole wide world. I do not have a problem with anybody's sexual preference, and I would not ever make a statement like that. And that, everybody has freedom of speech, and I think that's great, but that's ridiculous. I'm saddened to say that I even have to respond to that.
Thanks for that clarification. I have to say I'm tired. I've been interviewing for a few hours, so well, we've got 5 minutes. 5 minutes left. The Partners Health Center, which is the low income health care plan that we've developed. I guess it's city and county, and major grants from Johnson & Johnson. Was Johnson & Johnson one of the major? Anyway, the mayor said on an interview the other day that the city, he believed, had put in $25,000. I'm not sure whether that was an annual.
I think that was a bridge, so that there was funding while the project was waiting for more federal funding to come in. That would be coming in on this amount of money for this year, this amount of money for the next year, and yet they still had some construction bridge loan issues, I think.
So my question really is this? You're familiar with that?
I'm not real familiar with it,
okay.
so ask your question.
It's a health center for low-income people who qualify, and different doctors and medical technicians from around the city and the county contribute, time to, do the medical care and treatment and things like that. So I'm just wondering if this is is this something that we should continue supporting with, cash money or good spirits or what have you? I mean.
Well, I think that this really speaks to the whole issue of the livable wage and affordability, going back to those themes for a minute. Because if people are working here in Missoula and they're not making a wage they can live on, they're not offered full-time employment, and they're not offered health insurance, that has a very direct impact on their living situation and the health of their children. And so what we see here, right here in Missoula County, are women who aren't getting the right kind of prenatal care, children who aren't getting their immunizations unless they can get to the clinic. And so it's a real challenge. And I think that one of the issues as a small business owner that I look
We just
at
got a few minutes left.
is to try to look for ways that we can provide insurance through a pooled kind of situation among business groups or classes of businesses, because it's a real challenge trying to buy any sort of health insurance for your employees, for yourself.
Right. And we've got 2 minutes. Take about 30 seconds to wrap up your wrap, and then we'll turn it over to the challenger for her finish.
I believe the real challenges now are how we develop as a community, and whether we are going to continue to sprawl out, whether we're going to continue to be able to offer any sort of housing to people who are working full-time but making a very low wage, whether we're going to be able to create a transportation system that truly serves all of our community, and whether or not we're going to continue to improve the quality of our air and water.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
And Jamie, it's your wrap.
I think that the challenge is allowing people to have a say in what happens to their city. And also I think that the challenge is that we need to offer our city a healthy economy. And in order to do that, we need to be a little bit more friendly to business. And that is one thing that I would work very hard to try to see happen. I also really want to see us concentrate more on basic services and put the bond issues for things that are not basic services. I'm sure most people understand what I mean by that, but I think that we need to really concentrate on being accountable to the tax dollars that we have and make them go as far and as economical as we possibly can.
Thanks very much for coming down. Thank you both for running. It's a tough job, and I wish you both good fortune, as I do the community of Missoula. And you're watching Missoula Community Access Television. Thanks very much for watching. Linda Tracy and her challenger for the North Side Ward seat, Jamie Carpenter.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay. And thanks to the all-volunteer crew.